Hey everybody, so today I'm going to be reviewing Toward Freedom, The Case Against Race Reductionism by Toure F. Reed. Great book. I really enjoyed it. Read it in one sitting. That's not saying that much though. It's a pretty short book, a little less than 200 pages. Um, so let me start off with how I came across this book. So I was watching the Michael Brooks show, and the author Tory Reed, he was on, and they talked about the book, and I'm like, that sounds really interesting. And so what the author basically had in mind is he looked at the Sanders campaign, and one of the main criticisms levied against the Bernie Sanders campaign was that people called Bernie Sanders a class reductionist, that he focused too much on like class issues and didn't focus on like racial issues. They'd say like, "Oh, what's your plan for Black Americans?" And he'd say Medicare for all, and they're like, "Oh, that's not a plan for Black Americans." And he'd be like, "Oh, really?" But what that's getting at is this idea that when you're talking about like economic stuff, that's not this more identity politics focus that many more modern day liberalism is kind of focused on, where they think of like, oh, issues to help Black Americans is something like with Joe Biden with his vow to put like a Black woman on the Supreme Court. And not to say that that's not important for more symbolic reasons, but that doesn't really help the material conditions of Black Americans at large. Just that's just one example, but so that's kind of the point of this book, and that's why it's the case against race reductionism. That's more like a play on words of the fact that usually what gets talked about is class reductionism, and it's this idea that race and class are undeniably intertwined, and when you have these, basically, I mean, the main takeaway is that we need to move towards more public good oriented social democratic policies. And the other reason why I really enjoyed this book is because if you're a social democrat like me, or just someone that's more progressive, you don't like always having to point to Norway, Denmark, Sweden as like examples of those policies being successfully implemented. Luckily, there was actually a time in this country where social democratic policies were pretty mainstream. If we're looking at the 40s in this country, that social democracy was like what was very popular actually. And in 50s, 60s, I mean, not quite as popular, but I mean a lot more mainstream than they are today. And this is a good thing, and it kind of goes into the New Deal. It talks about some of the criticisms that are levied against the New Deal, also some of the things that people say about the New Deal that aren't exactly true. Because some of the things is that people say that the New Deal was good for white Americans, but it wasn't good for Black Americans. And this book digs into that. There are a ton of different like pretty specific examples, um, talking about different like labor leaders and things like that. And it also digs into the civil rights movement a little bit and the different things regarding unions during that time. It is, I will say, it's not exactly the easiest thing to read just because it's so example heavy. If you're just looking for like, I don't know, this is something I plan on referencing. Like it's something that like I feel like you should go through once, and then maybe like take notes, put like little sticky notes in of things that you can come back to later. Because I mean, I just feel like you're just not, unless you have like a photographic memory, you're just not going to absorb all the information in this book at one time. And I think that that's like totally okay. Um, this book talks about like the Moynihan report, which is something I wasn't super familiar with before this book, but apparently it has a fairly unique take on the Moynihan report, so that's interesting. But overall, I really enjoyed it. I would highly recommend it. It's pretty like I'd say it's a good jumping off point if you're looking for kind of if you're looking for a more like leftish kind of reading that isn't the conventional like liberalism. Like if you want something to dealing with like race in America that isn't this whole like identity politics neoliberal, just like, oh, like this like just like a basic diversity and like commercials and stuff, like that's the most important thing. If you want something besides that, that's like a real progressive thing talking about like things that will like actually help Black Americans, I think that this is a really really good book. I really enjoyed it, and I would highly recommend it. So, if you enjoyed this review, make sure to like and subscribe. If you disagreed with anything I said, please leave a comment down below. But it is a review, so I'm not sure what exactly you could disagree with. But if you do, definitely leave a comment down below. And have a great day.